Good afternoon, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Full Rides Again, the podcast where I, Jinx, your host and imaginary friend, answers the burning question of what happens when you release a rider into the wild and he gets a chance to explore the world. So if you've ever been interested in topics such as plot development, world building, character creation, or even character motivation, then this is a podcast for you, so please stay tuned. And on this week's exciting episode, I'm going to answer the burning question of what happens when you release a rider into the wild and he gets a chance to explore the world of energy sources. What better way to do that than start off with a couple of scenarios? First one being this. Imagine you're an individual who has been traveling through the desert for quite some time, and you are the unlucky sort that has absolutely no supplies. You ran out of food days ago, and you think you're about to run out of water. You haven't seen civilization in ages, and you are getting nervous. You don't know what's going on, and you think you will probably perish after so much time has gone through because you're going to run out of water. But as these dreadful thoughts are drifting into your mind, you spot something sparkling out in the distance, and you think, yes, this is an oasis. There is going to be water there. And part of your mind is thinking it could be a mirage, but you are not listening to that part because you need hope that you have found a way to survive. So you follow the shimmering light in the distance and you get closer and closer and you start realizing it is not a mirage. It really is there. There is something there and you are going to survive. You will be able to find this oasis and have fantastic water and live. But as you get closer, you start noticing it is not an oasis, and it is not water. Instead, it is row upon row of metal holding these giant metal reflective plates. And what you saw was the light reflecting off of those plates into the distance. What happens next? If that's not the scenario for you, how about this one instead? Imagine you've been hiking through the forest for quite some time. And this forest you've been hiking through is impressive. There are so many trees there, and they are absolutely towering above you, climbing high into the sky. And the forest itself is so thick with these trees and underbrush that you can't see between it. And you enjoy it. But eventually you get to a point where you pass through a couple trees and you break out of the forest. But you really only broke out of the wooden part of the forest, because now you are being surrounded by these metal pillars that are climbing high and high into the sky, and you think they're actually climbing higher than the trees themselves. But as you look up, they don't look like just pillars. At the top of them, you can see these giant circular blades that are spinning in one direction. And you have no idea what is going on with this weird metal forest, and you get nervous because you think you stumbled upon something you should not have seen. And you crawl back into the forest, or at least you attempt to crawl back into the wooden part of the forest, and it doesn't let you. You are stuck in the metal part. What happens next? And if that's not the scenario for you, you might enjoy this one a little bit more. Imagine you and your family have been enjoying the summer days. And by enjoying the summer and the warm weather, that means you're taking your boat out to the lakes. And you are trying all these different activities. You are going out boating. You are going paddle boarding. You are going jet skiing and all these different things. And you've been choosing these different lakes every weekend. And then one weekend you go and you bring out your paddle boards and your kayaks, and you and your family are just enjoying it, going around the lake. It's pretty calm out. There's not too many people out there in this lake. And it's in the middle of nowhere, really, surrounded by a whole bunch of mountains. And as you get to the middle of the lake with your group and you're just relaxing there, enjoying the sun and the water and the good weather and company, you start moving. You dismiss it for a minute because you think it's just the wind is catching your paddleboard, but you gradually start to pick up speed, and this wind is going, and you are moving faster and faster in one direction, and your entire family looks at each other, and you are all concerned because you don't know what is going on. None of you are actually paddling. You don't feel a breeze that would be moving you in that direction either. It makes no sense. So you start trying to paddle in the opposite direction, and that doesn't work, so you start trying to paddle towards shore, but that's not working either because this current that you are now riding is going even faster and you're stuck in it. People start falling off their paddle boards and you go more and more, and then you realize what's going on. You suddenly get to the edge of what you thought was the lake and you realize it's actually a giant concrete barrier, and now there's a hole in the barrier, and you are being pulled through the hole in that barrier, and you don't know what's going on. You don't know why you're being pulled there, but you're suddenly nervous because you don't want to go through that hole. What happens next? And because I want to, I have one final scenario for you. Imagine you've gone to a new country and you've been backpacking across it because you want to explore it thoroughly. Yes, you could have joined one of the major tour groups and gone to all the touristy sites and all that stuff and seen what everyone else wants to see, but you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to go discover the unknown. And from your experience, the best way to do that is just to backpack across the country in your own fashion. You'll come across a random fork in the road and you'll just flip a coin on which way to go. And then you'll just keep going and taking random turns, going across whatever you discover. And one day, you take a turn and it leads you to the middle of nowhere and you think, this is pretty cool. But as you get closer and closer, you realize it's not really the middle of nowhere. You're starting to see signs of civilization pop up. There are buildings and all these little houses and stuff, and it looks like you're on the outskirts of a town. And you get closer and closer and closer, and you realize you really are on the outskirts of the town, and the town's right ahead of you. And you think, this will be a great place to stop for the night. You need a break, you need to get some sleep. This is not a very popular location, so you get to enjoy truly the local customs and stuff. But you start noticing one odd thing as you get closer to this town. There are no people. And you think, okay, this is very weird. Why is this town deserted? Every building looks to be decent. Yes, some of them look more run down than others, and now you have a mystery on your hands. What happened to this town? You want to investigate. Is it truly deserted, or did everyone just leave for the day? But the more you look around, the more you start to see the signs. No one has lived there for a long time. Some of the houses, yes, they don't look too run down, but the closer you inspect, you can see the paint is peeling, the doors are rotten, the windows have breaks in them, and you get to a building, you are able to push your way in, and you start seeing that the furniture and all the pictures on the walls have dust and stuff hanging on them. And you think, okay, this is now a little creepy. But it's also getting later in the day, and you think you still need a place to rest, and this would be a great place to rest. So you find a slightly cleaner room that doesn't have as much dust and debris in it, and you go and crash for the night. But when you wake up, the first thing you notice is that your hair has started to fall out, and you don't feel so good. What happens next? Now, my friend, that should be enough with the scenario, so let's get on to the story behind them. A few months back, me and my buddy were driving through the desert on our way to a music festival, and he was driving and I was riding passenger, which allowed me to look around. And being the writer I am, I was looking for inspiration. And what really stuck out to me was being in the middle of the desert. There weren't too many towns, but I did see a lot of solar panels that were just in the distance, floating around. Not really floating. They were all lined up in rows, and if you looked at it correctly, it really looked like these solar panels were just a lake. Looking at it from one direction, you would see, look, they aren't a lake. They are just metal slabs upon metal barriers going on in lots of rows. Very interesting to see from different angles. And we were driving through, and I saw lots of these little farms. They were solar power farms because it's a great place. It's the desert where not much cloud coverage, not much rain, anything like that. So it was a perfect place to set up a solar power farm. You put up the solar panels and it will just keep collecting sunlight. And there wasn't just one farm. There were lots of them. I saw probably a dozen within 100 miles of each other. And some of them were being constructed and some were being expanded upon to make even more solar power, which it's kind of cool because that is probably where a lot of the energy in that region comes from, is those little solar power farms. And I gotta say, it was probably the first time I've actually seen a farm like that. I've driven through that area before many times in my life, but I've never paid attention to that part of the surrounding. But then it got me thinking though, I'm like, what other sources of energy have I encountered? And I realized I've seen a couple of different places like this. Not all solar power. Some were wind power, some were hydro. Not too many nuclear plants, but they all stuck out to me because they were all very distinct in what they did. But each of those played into my scenarios. And while none of my scenarios actually talked about the energy production, my inspiration came from energy production places. And I used 4 different types of examples, if you're able to catch them. The first scenario, I was using solar power, which directly correlated to my story. The second example was wind power, When I was growing up, my parents had a cabin out in the mountains. And in order to get to that cabin, you had to drive through a whole bunch of different little canyons and stuff. And one of the canyons was full of wind turbines that was just supplying a lot of the energy in that area. It was a very windy place, so it was a great place for turbines. And it was really just a field of massive metal towers just gathering wind and creating electricity for the surrounding area. Kind of cool. My third scenario involves hydroelectricity and a dam. Where I live, it's in the mountains, and there are a lot of reservoirs and man-made lakes and a lot of dams. So it's easy for someone to go through and see what the dams look like, and they're all just collecting energy and stuff for the different areas. And it's very common for people to be playing on these lakes. Boating, paddleboarding, kayaking, fishing, swimming, windsurfing. All sorts of different things on these lakes. Some people know why the dam is there, and some people don't. But the scenario played out is what happens if the dam is destroyed and you're stuck there. And as for the fourth scenario, it involves nuclear power. Not as easy to identify, because I didn't really claim it in the scenario, but it still gave me the idea. What if there was a nuclear power plant somewhere and there was a meltdown? What happens? What happens to the residents in the area? Do they disappear? Do they run away? Do they mutate? Lots of different ideas for it. In my scenario, I played with the meltdown, and there was no longer anyone living in the town, but there was still radiation and radiation sickness. I will admit I don't know much about radiation sickness and all that stuff, so I don't know the proper timelines for how long someone has to be there before they're sick and how long ago the meltdown has to be and the half-life of all that stuff. But I'm a writer, so I can play with it how I want, and in my world, the rules can be whatever they want it to be. If I want a meltdown to be fast and completely injure someone or completely get people sick within hours, they're going to get sick within hours, and there's going to be special radiation and stuff like that. If I want it to be survivable for so long, I'll make it survivable for so long because it's my world and there are protective measures around it, and they don't have to follow the rules of Earth because it is my writing and all that stuff. And this got me thinking, though, when it comes to writing and everything like this, and you're creating your worlds out there, how are your worlds being powered? How do your characters get electricity and all that, if it exists? Are you in a medieval world where there is no electricity and people have to light their houses with lamps and torches and fireplaces and heat everything that way and boil water in a kettle over a roaring fire? Or are you going super advanced where you are in the future and there is actually electricity powering everything? How does your society get electricity? Is there a common source of power? Do they follow one of our major power sources here? Are they gathering solar power because you are in a desert region and there is no real cloud coverage, so solar power is very efficient for people to get because everyone can gather power that way? Or are you in a very turbulent region where there are clouds, but you also have wind, so your wind turbines can collect energy and all that stuff? Or do you have to go the nuclear option? Or can you go a hydroelectric option and have dams and all this stuff? Or do you create your own method of electricity? Or are you using fossil fuels and gasoline and all this different stuff to power your civilization? How are things being powered? I never really thought of this being an option in my writing until I was driving through the desert and I saw the solar farms. I was thinking, how does my town get power? My town lives in the mountains, so solar power might be possible, but I have a lot of tree coverage, so maybe not. But I have also put my town next to a lake and river, so hydro could be a very viable option for my town. I don't really have magic, so I can't use mystical forces like that. Being a tourist destination, I don't think nuclear would be the option either. It's a ski resort type area, so still questions for me to answer, and it's not really relevant for my writing unless I make it relevant. I can give my character a job at the power plant, and that is how they're supplying energy, and they're just going to their job there. Or I can make it a whole bunch of different things. I can also make it a bigger plot and now make it more supernatural. I'm like, oh, look, there is a nuclear meltdown, and now it's infecting my citizens, and now we have somewhat of a zombie outbreak. It's not much of a plot point for why the outbreak is there. It's a starting point, but a lot of characters don't have to play with the fact that, oh look, there's a nuclear power plant that meltdown. What are they going to do? Do they have to go to the power plant to stop it? No, there's a zombie outbreak. Now they're just trying to survive. So yes, the cause of the outbreak was the power plant, but that's it. It's just world building at that point. Like, there was a power plant, and then there was not. And now there's zombies. So I can play with it that way. And you can too. You can give your energy source a reason for being there and turn it into somewhat of a plot point. And it could be the cause of an infection or an disaster, whatever you want it to be. You can make it a plot point on if the dam was destroyed, what happens then? Does a town get flooded? They can't really do much about it then because the dam, it's not easy to construct. It's not quick. So if it's destroyed, a town would be flooded. Maybe it's also your characters are trying to get it so the dam is not destroyed. Or your characters are trying to get to be where a dam is not constructed in the first place because they want the river to go through. They don't want a lake. They don't want something like that. Who knows? You can use that all as plot points, but it's also good as world building. And you as the writer should know how your world is getting energy. And you don't have to use the common ideas of, yes, we are getting energy by solar, wind, fossil fuels, water, or nuclear energy. You can make it whatever you want. You can make it a mystical source. That you have a tower of wizards who are just supplying mana to an orb that will then dispense across the world and power up all the magical devices. Or you can use like soul crystals, or if you have adventurers that are hunting down rabid monsters and beasts, that as soon as they kill a monster, a soul crystal is formed, and that soul crystal is used to power other things. Who knows? You can be creative with your power source because it is your world and your writing and whatever you want to do. Who am I to tell you how to do that? I'm just here to ask you the questions of how is your world being powered in the first place? Why is there energy? Why is there technology? What happens if their power source is destroyed? Is there a flood? Is there a zombie outbreak? Does everyone starve? Do they have to try to fix the energy source? Do they have to try to find a new energy source? What happens? These are questions to ask. Whether or not you include it in your writing is up to you. But as a writer, you might want to be able to know these in the background, just in case you want to use them. And for all I know, just listening to this episode might give you an idea for a plot. Any of my scenarios, I don't care if people use them. I'm giving them to you. You're more than welcome to use them if you want to, because you got an idea out of it. I'd be happy to let you. And I'd be happy that I inspired you to do something in your writing. But I'm going off on a tangent now, my friend, and I'm getting to the point where I have to call it a day. Though before I do, I have a writing prompt for you. Write a story about an individual who moved to a town that was being powered by solar energy. But as soon as they moved into the town, they no longer could use solar energy. I don't care the genre, whether it's fantasy, romance, action, or horror, and I don't care the format, whether it's poetry, flash fiction, a journal entry, or even a song. As always, all I really care about is you have fun with it and make the most out of it. But now it really is time for me to call it a day. If you enjoyed the content of this week's episode, please give me a follow. And if you want any more content from the Jinks'd world, visit my website at jinksdworld.com. That is JINKSDWORLD.com. Until next time, have fun writing.